Good evening, I'm Joseph Long. I'm going to speak to you about the Syrian uprising, the role that the Kurds have to play, and the foreign policy opportunities and challenges this presents to the United States and its allies. The Arab Spring struck Syria with full force last February, and the fighting has intensified ever since. With each passing month, it's culminated into a full-blown civil war now, and that has now cost the lives of over 20,000 Syrians. The Syrians, the Syrian Kurds see a golden opportunity in all this to regain their civil liberties and attain a certain degree of autonomy. Militant Kurdish factions threaten to derail the aspirations of the Kurds. Many countries in the region view the autonomous Kurdish state in Syria as a threat. The danger for the Syrians and the region is the fragmentation along ethno-sectarian lines that could break up the country into weak autonomous states. And to prevent this, the United States and its allies, among them in the United Nations and the Arab League, need to cooperate on a united strategy that will help facilitate regime change in Syria and thus protect the ethnicities and religions from repression. Syria is a country that was arbitrarily carved out of the former Ottoman Empire back at the end of World War I. Syria's population of about 22 million is separated into four main ethno-sectarian groups. Syria's two main ethnic divisions are the Arabs and the Kurds, 90% Arab, 10% Kurd. The sectarian divisions are a little more diverse, with approximately 74% Sunni Muslim, 10% Alawite, a derivative of Shia Muslim Islam, and about 10% Christian. And there's about 6% Druze. These are folks that are ostensibly Muslim. However, it's viewed more as a cult, not a sect. The Syrians Syria was administered by the French during the interwar period known as the French Mandate. It was during this period that service within the armed forces was viewed as collaboration and therefore beneath most Syrians. As a result, Sunni Arabs shunned military service, while Alawites, who had been oppressed by the Sunni majority, embraced it. Consequently, Alawite minority became more and more militaristic over the years, and after the French Mandate was over, they became the ruling party, the ruling Ba'ath Party. The Alawite Muslims are ostensibly a sect of Shia Muslim Islam, as mentioned, but they are considered heretical by the Sunni majority. Bashar al-Assad is an Alawite and leader of Syria's Ba'ath Party who inherited his power from his father, Hafez al-Assad, 12 years ago. Hafez al-Assad ruled Syria for 40 years before that with an iron fist and put down an uprising in 1982 where he killed over 20,000 people in the town of Hama, which is in central Syria. In his present fight for survival, the Syrian regime is supported by Russia, China, and most notably Iran. Since 1979, Iran has been maintained close ties with Syria. Support from the Lebanese Hezbollah is also forthcoming, and they are both Iran and the Hezbollah are predominantly Shia Muslim. Iran leverages its proxy, the Hezbollah, to maintain a degree of influence and power over both Syria and Lebanon. The opposition forces arrayed against the Syrian regime are mostly Sunni Muslims who are organized loosely into the Syrian National Council. Turkey, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar support the Syrian opposition both with lethal aid and humanitarian aid. The U.S. and the West support the opposition through humanitarian aid primarily, and sanctions and economic and political sanctions. The Kurds, for their part, support the opposition, but only to a point. If a predominantly Sunni Muslim regime emerges from this present conflict, It may terminate Syria's alliance with Iran and thus drive it to develop closer ties with Saudi Arabia and provide Syria's 1.7 million Kurds with at least a chance for autonomy. The Kurds are one of the largest stateless peoples in the world. There's over 30 million of them, and they live primarily in Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Syria, and some live in Azerbaijan. Um, Turkey has the largest population of ethnic Kurds. The stated goal of the Kurdistan People's Congress, the militant arm of the Kurdish group, is full autonomy, or rather full statehood for the Kurdish peoples. Now, if the KGK, as they're known, ever achieve their goal, then Turkey would stand to lose the largest amount of territory. Iran's Kurdish population is the second largest in the region, and they are actively oppressed by the Shia majority there in Iran, since the Kurds are primarily Sunnis. Iraq is home to the third largest population of ethnic Kurds, and it's also the region's only autonomous Kurdish state. Syria's 1.7 million ethnic Kurds may make up approximately 10% of Syria's total population. The Syrian regime actively represses them. But in late 2012, the Syrian regime gave up control of Al-Haska province to the Kurdish people. Now the Kurds control the border between Turkey and Syria. They also control the border between Syria and Iran, or rather Iraq. Turkey fears the deliberate proliferation of advanced weapons to the militant Kurds and believes that the militant Kurds may use Syria as a base of operation in which to foment trouble inside Turkey and reignite that war. For its part, the U.S. is primarily concerned with regional stability, and above all, it's imperative to avoid the kind of fragmentation among ethnic and religious lines that could lead to fragmentation of the country, which is not something that we want to see, because it could invite terrorism, and the fighting is likely to spread to other vulnerable states. The U.S. relationship with the semi-autonomous Iraqi state of Kurdistan is very interesting because it's a close relationship that has evolved through decades of conflict. It's been strong since 2006, when the state declared its autonomy from Iran, or rather Iraq. But its relations with Turkey are an on-again, off-again thing. It's often characterized by distrust and hostility over the past 7 years. However, Turkey, for its part, Turkey accused the Kurdish state in northern Iraq, of being a haven for Kurdish terrorists groups like the KGK. Turkey has come to terms with this since, and there's a climate of accommodation that's descended upon the two regions. The driving force, of course, is the mutual interest of oil. There's lots of oil in the Kurdish state of Iraq. By early September 2012, Turkey and the KGK reached an agreement for the sale of oil and gas. The Turkish support for the KRG, or rather the Kurdish state, could begin exporting oil along the new pipeline as early as 2013, a pipeline that would bypass existing Iraqi oil pipelines. This doesn't set too well with the government down in Baghdad. And the United States, for its part, has advised the Kurdish state to run this, or to make Baghdad a part of any agreement. Now, on 12 July 2012, elements of the Syrian Kurds signed a 7-point agreement in Erbil, Iraq, with the KGK, the establishment of Kurdish Supreme Council as a governing body for all Kurdish-controlled territories. This makes Turkey very uncomfortable, to say the least, because they're afraid that the terrorist groups, KGK, will, of course, use Syria as a safe haven. They also fear that it will encourage their own restive Kurdish population to renew its fight for autonomy. Again, all three regions of Turkey, Iraq, and Syria are home to massive oil reserves. So the Kurds basically sit on top of lots and lots of oil in the region. Now, in order to defuse the potential hostile situations in northern Syria, Turkey needs to basically change its tack. It needs to come to some kind of agreement with the Kurds in their own territory so that they can move forward and somehow diffuse the Turkish or their Kurdish aspirations for autonomy. Syria's large ethnic Kurdish population resides, of course, in northern Syria, and that's where the bulk of the oil reserve is located. They are courted by both sides of the Syrian regime and the opposition groups for their support. However, the Syrian Kurds have very little reason to trust either side either side in this conflict, and have chosen to seek support from Iraqi Kurdistan to help guarantee their future. The U.S. policy towards Syrian Kurds is to work toward integrating them into a post-Assad Syria that is more pluralistic and democratic in nature. The U.S. policy for Syria is to increase sanctions and advocate regime change and increase humanitarian and non-lethal aid. Almost every country, even stable countries, experience some degree of ethnic tension, ethnic and sectarian tension. Europe experienced some degree. There are long-standing ethnic and religious and linguistic divisions in every country. Whether or not these tensions erupt into conflict depends on several internal factors that include poor governance, factional politics, and state-sponsored repression and discrimination. In addition to these factors, unfolding political change such as leadership changes or assassinations often serve to destabilize the regions and create conditions that lead to ethno-sectarian conflicts. The framers of the Constitution recognized this and warned against many of these factors and tailored the Constitution to help minimize the dangers that they pose. So any country that has strong democratic traditions and respect for rule of law is better equipped to deal with ethnic sectarian divisions, but they are not immune. However, there are other factors that even good governance and strong constitutions and respect for rule of law cannot mitigate. Globalization, or the process of interaction and integration among the people, corporations, and governments, has both good and bad effects on ethno-sectarian tensions, and the very same technical advances that facilitate flow of communications and travel, labor and capital across the international borders also reduces the ability of governments to act autonomously to protect their own interests. It also helps mitigate ethno-sectarian violence. The CNN effect serves to draw attention to government repression and oppression. The CNN effect is a type of propaganda that can influence public opinion, which in turn affects government's decision with regard to foreign policy, and sometimes it can stay the hand of a government that is bent on repression and maybe even hold off, or rather head off, genocide before it happens. Population demographic changes can cause a lot of ethnic tension. A growing migrant workforce, both legal and illegal, can significantly alter a nation's democratic composition, which often fuels tensions between ethnic and sectarian groups. This also goes for any type of demographic shift in population with regard to fertility, ages, and that sort of thing, populations. Regions relatively free of ethnic violence. China, owing to mainly its homogeneous and often xenophobic nature of their population, the countries of East Asia are relatively free of ethnic sectarian violence. China employs a carrot and stick approach to keep its 55 minority groups under control. Think of China as basically, as long as the population remains compliant, they're pretty much left alone. If they become restive and decide to rebel against the Chinese, then they lose pretty much all autonomy, and the Chinese will come and repress them. That is basically how China deals with its populations. Sub-Saharan Africa and Middle East are the regions most susceptible to new and renewed ethnic sectarian conflict. The legacy of the past internal wars and consequences of ongoing conflicts and civil war within Syria, and the violence in the Gaza Strip are likely to continue in the foreseeable future. The growing sense of empowerment among ethnic Kurds that serves to intensify ethnic tensions spanning multiple countries and regions is also another driving factor. So the implications for the U.S. and the international community are the prevention and management and resolution of these current and future ethnic conflicts requires an enhanced and sustained commitment. This long-term commitment involves providing diplomatic and nation-building resources, and there has to be a lot of patience, and it's going to take some time. So winning a lasting peace is paramount in ethnic sectarian conflict, and settlements negotiated must address the underlying causes of the consequences unique to each situation. Part of the process would be holding governments and leaders accountable for their actions and their failure to respect human rights on both sides, not just the government side. It's often overlooked that the rebels commit just as many atrocities as the government does. So holding these leaders accountable for their actions should cut both ways. There are three theories. The primordialist theory holds that the conflict between certain ethnic groups and religious groups is inevitable because it's deep-seated and historical antipathy, and it's enduring. Edward Stiles was among the first to express this idea when he remarked that family attachments, there is a significant relational quality that can only be called primordial. It says that primordial identities are natural and given. They cannot be explained or analyzed by referring to social interaction, and they deal essentially with sentiments and affections. Analysts now reject the primordialist theory in favor of one that views ethnicity as something more inherently flexible. The other view is, of course, is that what causes ethnic violence is that ethnicity and religion become polarized and lead to widespread conflict. Proposes that elites and leaders foment ethnic religious violence in an effort to gain, maintain, and increase their political and economic power. So it's the instrumentalist view or theory of ethnic sectarian conflict is that they contend that ethnicity is socially and politically constructed over time and neither natural nor given. It places the emphasis on the role of ethnic leaders or opportunists who heighten the importance of ethnicity in order to lay claim to the government resources. In other words, a Hitler type of person who takes advantage of the ethnic divisions that are already there. The flaws in both theories lead to the constructionist or constructivist theory that says that social psychology studies contend that ethnicity is a dynamic and malleable thing. Its ethnicity can be influenced by internal and external actors, and changes in ethnicity can occur through evolutionary and as well as revolutionary mechanisms. The Marrano Jews who lived in southern Europe during the Reconquista period from the 14th and rather the 15th and 16th centuries uh, basically faced the dilemma that they either changed their religion or they were persecuted. Many did change their religion and merged into Christian society, all the while keeping some of their traditions alive. Over time, the Marrano Jews lost all ethnic identification from the original group and were indistinguishable. The debate between primordialists and instrumentalists and constructivists over the ethnicity really is over what ethnicity really is and ultimately drives and sustains ethnic conflict may very well never be resolved and may prove to be inconclusive. So the theories are often pitted against each other and each fail to explain every ethnic conflict comprehensively. They're not mutually exclusive, as often claimed, but they do complement each other. Finally, the case for military intervention. Military intervention carries with it certain benefits that, if successful, could benefit the United States and its allies in 4 ways. First, a quick and decisive intervention will help foster free and democratic Syria that could become an ally and a trading partner. While there's no guarantee that this will happen, the United States, the quicker the regime change is accomplished, the more likely it is to come to pass. Second, without the regime of Bashar al-Assad, Iran loses its staunch ally in the region and therefore its means of spreading its hegemony further west. Third, the Hezbollah is effectively cut off from Iran, its benefactor, and could lose its steady source of money and weaponry. And fourth, Russia loses its window on the Mediterranean. And one of its few remaining allies in the Middle East, Russia maintains a naval base at Tartus for over 50 years. And this Syria is a client state for its weaponry. Faced with the loss of this, Russia may even choose to support a coalition. Intervention is supported by U.S. Senators McCain, Lieberman, and Graham. They favor creating safe zones inside the country for a transition government. One reason for caution, though, is that Syria purportedly has a large stockpile of chemical weapons, and Syria has warned that if attacked, it will use the chemical weapons. Therefore, securing these weapons and preventing their use is paramount in any strategy for effective regime change. The use of these weapons against the opposition, or anybody for that matter, has been a so-called red line for the U.S. administration and would prompt intervention. However, Senator McCain pointed out that drawing this red line gives the Syrian regime carte blanche to use any means short of chemical weapons to put down its uprising, so it can use anything that can cause mass casualties, and there are lots of things that can do that other than just chemical weapons. Additionally, Israel has publicly stated that it will attack if chemical weapons are transferred to the Lebanese Hezbollah. While the regional allies with the Arab League and the UN supported coalition could set up and maintain no-fly zones that would deprive current Syrian regime of its most valuable asset against the opposition, its air force. In order to be successful, a clear unified command structure would have to be in place. Participating states must know in advance their policy objectives as well as their exit strategy for the no-fly zones, and there must be a regional support in order for the no-fly zones to be successful. Any long-term solution for a post-Assad Syria must include provisions for an autonomous Kurdish state. The U.S. State Department needs to pressure the Syrian National Council to do more to reassure the Kurds that they will be represented in the decision-making bodies and the drafting of a provisional constitution that would spell out what the Kurds can expect in a post-Assad era. The fighting in Syria reflects regional tensions between Sunni and Shia Muslims, Arabs and Kurds, Arabs and Persians, and these tensions have shaped events throughout the Middle East for centuries. And today, many observers see Syria as heading toward fragmentation following along these same ethnic and sectarian lines. It is going to take swift action from the international community to prevent this from happening. The U.S. needs to take leadership role in the intervention in order to help guarantee that it can guide the peace process in the post-Assad Syria. However, the U.S. needs to ensure that an operation involving ground troops should be predominantly Arab in nature. Effective regime change in Syria could help guarantee human rights for all Syrians, not just Kurds, and thwart Iranian regional hegemony and cut off the Lebanese Hezbollah from its proxy Iran. With each passing day that the Syrian uprising continues, the window of opportunity closes a little more. Thank you.